Jasmine Washington watched as the white woman in the expensive suit deliberately took her first-class seat and refused to move. The flight attendant's uncomfortable glance between them spoke volumes. "Should I call security, ma'am?" he whispered. Jasmine smiled coldly. "Tell her who owns Black Sky Airlines first." Before we dive into this incredible story of prejudice confronted by power, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated based on your appearance. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. The 5:00 a.m. alarm jolted Jasmine Washington awake in her Atlanta penthouse. At 38, the CEO of Black Sky Airlines had long abandoned the luxury of sleeping in even on potentially life-changing days. Today's investor meeting in Chicago could determine whether the company she'd built from nothing would remain under her control or fall to corporate raiders. As she performed her morning stretches, Jasmine's mind drifted back to her childhood in Southside Chicago. The daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, Jasmine had grown up watching her mom return home with swollen feet and a spine that never quite straightened. "Education is freedom," her mother would say, pushing Jasmine to study while other kids played. That sacrifice had propelled Jasmine through business school and eventually to the helm of her own airline. Her morning ritual continued as she brewed coffee and opened her laptop, scanning overnight performance reports. The numbers looked solid. Passenger satisfaction up 3%, on-time departures, improved operating costs down, but the vultures circling her company cared only about immediate profit margins. "Air Global thinks they can swallow us whole," she muttered to herself, reviewing documents about the larger airline's acquisition strategy. 4 years of building Black Sky from a regional carrier into a respected national airline, and now bigger companies were targeting them precisely because of that success. Her phone buzzed with a text from Darnell Jenkins, VP of Operations. "Engine issues on the G650. Maintenance says at least 36 hours. Alternative arrangements." Jasmine sighed. Today, of all days, her company jet needed maintenance. She had options charter, another private plane delay her trip, but neither felt right. After a moment's consideration, she texted back. "Booking commercial. Black Sky Flight 277 to Ord. Same standards we expect from our customers." If she asked passengers to trust her airline with their travel needs, she should demonstrate the same confidence. Plus, flying her own commercial line would give her an opportunity to experience the service as customers did. As she packed her carry-on with surgical precision, one tailored suit presentation materials, overnight essentials, Jasmine thought about what it meant to be one of the only Black female airline CEOs in America. The aviation industry remained overwhelmingly white and male. At industry conferences, she was frequently mistaken for someone's assistant rather than a chief executive. Each time she corrected the error with gracious professionalism, while internally adding another brick to her wall of determination. Her phone rang again. It was Keisha, her executive assistant. "Morning, boss. Just confirming you received the updated projection models for the presentation. Got them. They strengthen our case considerably," Jasmine replied, zipping her bag. "Any other updates?" Keisha paused. "Just be prepared for the usual from Peterson and his faction. I overheard them talking about emotional decision-making in leadership yesterday. We both know what that's code for." Jasmine exhaled slowly. "Thanks for the heads up. Nothing I haven't handled before." After ending the call, she stood before her closet mirror, evaluating her appearance. The navy blue suit projected authority. The subtle gold earrings added polish without flash. Her natural hair was impeccably styled, professional yet authentically hers, a balance she had fought to normalize in corporate settings. "You're ready," she told her reflection. "You've earned your seat at every table, on every flight, in every boardroom." With one last check of her presentation materials, the strategy that could save thousands of jobs and keep Black Sky independent, Jasmine headed for the door. She had built an airline against impossible odds. Compared to that one investor meeting, should be simple. She couldn't have known what awaited her at Gate B23. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport heaved with holiday travelers despite the early hour. Jasmine navigated the security line with practiced efficiency, her TSA pre-check status usually offering a streamlined experience. Usually. ID and boarding pass, the TSA agent demanded without looking up. When Jasmine presented her documents, the agent scrutinized her driver's license photo, then her face, then back to the license with uncomfortable intensity. "This is you," he questioned, despite the obvious match. "Yes, it is," Jasmine replied evenly, noting how the white businessman ahead of her had barely received a glance. The agent examined her first-class boarding pass with visible skepticism. "Purpose of travel to Chicago." "Business," Jasmine answered, maintaining her composure despite the irregular questioning. After finally clearing security, she overheard two businessmen walking behind her. "They must be hiring new flight attendants," one commented, just loudly enough for Jasmine to hear. "Good-looking one there." Jasmine didn't break stride. These assumptions had followed her career like persistent shadows. The automatic categorization of a well-dressed black woman as service staff rather than a passenger or, in her case, the airline CEO, was nothing new. As she approached the Black Sky Airlines customer service desk to check on her flight status, the staff reaction created a stark contrast. The counteragent's eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Washington, we weren't expecting you on a commercial flight today," she said, immediately straightening her posture. "Engine maintenance," Jasmine explained, with a warm smile. "And sometimes, it's good to experience things from the customer perspective." The supervisor was quickly called over, schedules were checked, and suddenly Jasmine had a small entourage ensuring her flight would depart on time. The nearby travelers who had ignored or dismissed her moments earlier now watched with curious expressions as she received deferential treatment. Stepping away to take a call, Jasmine heard her mentor's voice. "Ready to show those vultures what real leadership looks like?" Marcus Reynolds asked. The former airline executive had taken Jasmine under his wing when no one else would give her a chance. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. "Though I'm flying commercial today, so I'll have to mentally rehearse in a slightly smaller space." "Good. Keeps you connected to the product. Remember, you've outworked and outthought everyone in that room. Don't let them forget it." After ending the call, Jasmine proceeded to her gate where passengers were already gathering for boarding. Behind the counter stood gate agent Alexandra Holt, a woman in her mid-40s with highlighted blonde hair and an expensive-looking watch that caught the fluorescent lighting. Jasmine observed Alexandra's interactions with passengers with professional interest. A white executive approached, and Alexandra's demeanor immediately brightened. "Good morning, sir. Chicago for business. We're expecting beautiful weather there today. I've upgraded you to an exit row with extra legroom." Moments later, an elderly Latino couple approached. "Boarding passes," Alexandra stated flatly, extending her hand without the smile or eye contact she'd offered the previous passenger. "You'll need to check that bag. It's too large." The pattern continued. Warm, accommodating service for certain passengers, clipped by the book treatment for others. Jasmine made mental notes. Black Sky's training emphasized consistent service, regardless of who sat in which seat. When boarding began, Jasmine waited for the first-class announcement. As she approached the gate, boarding pass in hand, Alexandra gave her a quick once-over. "This is first-class boarding only," she said with thinly disguised impatience. "Yes, I'm aware," Jasmine replied, presenting her boarding pass. Alexandra looked genuinely surprised as she scanned the document. "Oh, Seat 3A. Have a good flight." No smile, no weather update. Just procedural efficiency. Walking down the jetway, Jasmine mentally shifted gears to her upcoming presentation. The Black Sky strategy she'd developed could preserve jobs while expanding routes into underserved communities. The spreadsheets showed it working sustainable growth instead of slash-and-burn cost-cutting. All she needed was the board's support against Air Global's takeover attempt. As she approached the aircraft door, Jasmine reminded herself that she belonged in every space she entered, whether a first-class cabin or a boardroom. She had earned her seat literally and figuratively. What she didn't expect was that she would have to earn it all over again in the next 20 minutes. Jasmine stepped onto the aircraft, exchanging a professional nod with the flight attendant greeting passengers. The first-class cabin gleamed with its leather seats and increased space, a product of the interior redesign Jasmine had personally overseen the previous year. She moved toward seat 3A, her assigned window position in the second row. She stopped short. A woman was already settled there, tapping at her phone with manicured nails. It took Jasmine a moment to recognize Alexandra Holt, the gate agent, who had just checked her boarding pass minutes earlier. Jasmine's carry-on bag, which she had sent ahead for courtesy storage, had been moved to the overhead bin, and her pre-placed jacket was draped carelessly over an armrest. Maintaining her composure, Jasmine approached the seat. "Excuse me, I believe you're in my seat, 3A. Alexandra glanced up with mild annoyance. "No, this is my seat." "There must be some confusion," Jasmine said, keeping her voice measured. "My boarding pass is for 3A by the window." "I think you must be mistaken," Alexandra replied without looking up from her phone. "Perhaps you misread your seat assignment. First class is full, so you're probably in economy." She said the last word with a subtle emphasis that suggested Jasmine belonged there. Jasmine felt eyes on her from other first-class passengers already seated. Some watched with uncomfortable expressions, others with barely concealed interest in the developing situation. A white businessman across the aisle suddenly became intensely focused on his magazine. "I didn't misread anything," Jasmine said, producing her boarding pass. "See seat 3A. Alexandra barely glanced at the document. "There must be an error in the system. I specifically requested this seat during pre-boarding. I'm airline staff." The flight attendant, Roger Miller, according to his name tag, approached with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is there a problem here?" Before Jasmine could answer, Alexandra interjected. "This woman seems confused about her seating assignment. Could you help her find her correct seat?" Roger turned to Jasmine with an apologetic expression. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Jasmine handed it over, noting how Alexandra hadn't been asked to produce hers. Roger examined the document, his expression shifting to one of uncertainty. "This does say seat 3A, he confirmed, looking between the two women. Alexandra shook her head. "There must be a mistake. I specifically arranged for this seat. I have certain medical needs that require me to sit here." "Perhaps we could see your boarding pass as well," Jasmine suggested evenly. Alexandra waved her hand dismissively. "I don't need to show my boarding pass. I work for the airline industry." Roger shifted his weight uncomfortably. "It's standard procedure to verify seat assignments when there's a conflict, Miss Holt." "Alexandra Holt," she supplied, making no move to produce any documentation. From the cockpit doorway came the captain's voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight departure delay. We hope to have everyone seated shortly so we can prepare for pushback." The announcement added pressure to the situation. Other passengers began to fidget, checking watches and phones. The confrontation was now holding up the entire flight. Roger lowered his voice. "Perhaps one of you would be willing to accept an alternative seat. We have one available in row 5. "Why should I move when I have the correct seat assignment?" Jasmine asked reasonably. Alexandra's expression hardened. "Look, I think we all know how these upgrades sometimes happen. Perhaps you were automatically bumped to first class because of some computer error or the flight was overbooked. But I specifically need this seat." The implication hung in the air that Jasmine couldn't possibly have legitimately purchased a first-class ticket or belonged in the premium cabin. Jasmine felt a familiar heat rising in her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced countless times throughout her career, when her qualifications, authority, or mere presence was questioned based on her appearance. She could feel herself approaching a familiar crossroads, assert herself, and risk being labeled as aggressive or accommodate the unreasonable demand and reinforce the behavior. Neither option felt satisfactory. "I purchased this specific seat for a reason," Jasmine stated firmly. "I have work to prepare for before landing." "I'm not moving." Alexandra's eyes narrowed as she turned to Roger. "Can you please call your supervisor? This is becoming ridiculous." Roger nodded nervously and reached for the cabin phone as more passengers began to board, creating a traffic jam in the aisle as the standoff continued. Jasmine maintained perfect posture, refusing to be diminished by Alexandra's dismissive attitude. She had built an airline from nothing. She would not be displaced from her rightful seat on her own aircraft. The confrontation was just beginning. The cabin's atmosphere thickened as Alexandra motioned impatiently for the senior flight attendant. Brady Thompson, distinguished by his gold wings pin, indicating his veteran status, approached with a practiced, neutral expression. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked, glancing between Alexandra and Jasmine. Alexandra immediately adopted a victimized tone. "I'm being harassed over my seat assignment. I've explained that I require this specific seat for medical reasons, yet this woman refuses to accept it." The subtle emphasis on this woman carried unmistakable condescension. Jasmine had heard this tone throughout her career, the implication that she was an inconvenience simply for existing in spaces others felt she didn't belong. "I have documentation confirming my assignment to 3A," Jasmine stated calmly, again producing her boarding pass and ID. "I've repeatedly asked Miss Holt to show her documentation for the same seat, but she's refused." Brady examined Jasmine's boarding pass carefully. This does indeed show seat 3A assigned to Miss Washington. The boarding process had now stalled completely. Passengers backed up in the jetway were becoming restless, checking watches and sighing audibly. Through the cabin windows, Jasmine could see ground crew members gesturing about the delay. "I don't care what her paper says," Alexandra declared, settling more firmly into the seat. "I checked the manifest earlier as a gate agent. There was clearly a mistake in the system. Besides, I need the extra legroom more than she does." She gestured vaguely at Jasmine's physique, implying that her own greater height justified the seat theft. Jasmine felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same tension she'd experienced when a venture capitalist had suggested her airline business plan was impressively ambitious for someone from her background. The same strain she'd felt when a potential investor had asked if there was a man with aviation experience on her team. The same constriction that accompanied each microaggression and blatant prejudice she'd faced while climbing to her current position. "The system doesn't make mistakes with seat assignments," Jasmine responded evenly. "And even if it did, the solution wouldn't be to simply take someone else's confirmed seat without documentation." Alexandra's expression hardened. "Look, I don't think you understand how things work. Certain people may not be familiar with proper airplane etiquette, but those of us who fly regularly know that flexibility is expected." The loaded phrase, "certain people," hung in the air like toxic gas. Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably, pretending to be absorbed in magazines or phones, while actually following every word of the exchange. Jasmine's phone vibrated in her pocket, likely board members wondering about her delay. The Chicago meeting loomed just hours away, with millions of dollars and thousands of jobs hanging in the balance. She needed to review her presentation during this flight, not battle for a seat she had rightfully purchased. From the corner of her eye, Jasmine spotted another flight attendant discreetly speaking into a phone near the galley. Moments later, 2 airport security officers appeared at the aircraft door. The younger officer, whose name badge read Davis, immediately turned his attention to Jasmine rather than surveying the situation first. "Ma'am, is there a problem here?" Before Jasmine could respond, Alexandra interjected with rehearsed distress. "Thank goodness you're here. I've been trying to explain my seating needs and it's become quite uncomfortable." Officer Davis nodded sympathetically toward Alexandra, then addressed Jasmine with markedly different tone. "Ma'am, the flight needs to depart. If you're creating a disturbance—" "I'm not creating anything," Jasmine interrupted firmly. "I'm attempting to sit in the seat assigned to me, which this woman has taken without authorization." Brady, the senior flight attendant, cleared his throat. "Officer, if I may." He held out his hand for Jasmine's boarding pass again, then pulled out a manifest from his pocket. After comparing the 2 documents, he looked up. The manifest confirms that 3A is indeed assigned to Jasmine Washington. Alexandra's confidence wavered slightly, but she held her ground. There must be some mistake. Check again. Miss Holt Brady said carefully, "Could I see your boarding pass, please?" With visible reluctance, Alexandra finally retrieved a crumpled boarding pass from her purse. Brady examined it, then looked up with newfound resolve. "Miss Holt, your assigned seat is 8C in business class. Not first class at all." Alexandra flushed pink. "That's impossible. I specifically arranged." "The documentation is clear," Brady interrupted firmly. "Miss Washington has the correct seat assignment for 3A. The security officers, now fully informed, shifted their attention appropriately. Officer Davis's demeanor transformed from skepticism to accommodation. "Miss Holt, you'll need to move to your assigned seat immediately. The flight is delayed because of this situation." Alexandra remained firmly planted. "I have medical issues that require extra space. Surely there's some accommodation that can be made without this." Escalation. What do you think about how this situation is unfolding? Have you ever witnessed something similar on a flight? If you believe Alexandra should move to her assigned seat, comment number 1. If you think Jasmine should just accept another first-class seat to avoid conflict, comment number 2. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to stand your ground against unfair treatment. But how would you handle being repeatedly questioned and dismissed despite having clear proof you're in the right? And what do you think happens when Jasmine finally reveals exactly who she is? Let's continue with this incredible story. Officer Davis adjusted his approach, now addressing Alexandra directly. "Ma'am, the documentation clearly shows this seat belongs to Miss Washington. You need to relocate to your assigned seat in business class." Alexandra's expression hardened as she clutched her designer handbag tighter. "This is ridiculous. I specifically requested accommodation for medical reasons. I cannot sit in business class." "What medical condition requires seat 3A specifically?" Brady asked, professional but skeptical. Alexandra hesitated. "I have circulation issues. I need the particular legroom configuration in this exact seat." Jasmine had remained silent, weighing her options carefully. She had spent years cultivating an image of composure and professionalism, knowing that as a black woman in corporate America, she would be judged more harshly for any display of frustration. The double standard was exhausting but familiar. The standoff had now delayed boarding for nearly 15 minutes. Passengers trapped in the jetway were growing increasingly vocal about their frustration. Jasmine could feel the collective impatience building with herself, unfairly positioned as the cause despite being the wronged party. It was decision time. She could continue this public dispute, possibly making headlines that would distract from her crucial investor meeting. She could accept another first-class seat, effectively rewarding Alexandra's behavior, or she could deploy the nuclear option, revealing her identity. For 4 years, she had maintained a relatively low public profile, focusing on building Black Sky Airlines rather than her personal brand. Few passengers would recognize her face, though her name was well known in aviation circles. This strategic anonymity had allowed her to observe operations without the distortion that comes when employees know the boss is watching. As Jasmine deliberated, an unexpected ally emerged. A man in seat 4B lowered his financial magazine, studying her face with growing recognition. "Excuse me," he interjected, "but aren't you Jasmine Washington? I just read about you in Aviation Business Monthly." A ripple of curious murmurs spread through the first-class cabin. Alexandra's expression flickered with uncertainty. Jasmine nodded slightly. "Yes, I am." The passenger continued, clearly impressed. "You were featured in their Transforming the Industry issue last month. Your approach to regional route expansion was brilliant." Alexandra scoffed. "What does that have to do with anything?" Jasmine had made her decision. The situation had escalated beyond reasonable resolution without pulling rank. She reached into her purse and retrieved her corporate ID and executive credentials. "It has everything to do with this situation," Jasmine stated, calmly handing her identification to Brady. I'm not just a passenger on this flight." Brady's eyes widened as he examined her credentials. "Miss Washington is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Black Sky Airlines," he announced, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The cabin fell silent. Alexandra's face registered shock, then disbelief. That's not possible." "I assure you it's not only possible, it's factual," Jasmine replied evenly. "Black Sky Airlines is my company." The power dynamic shifted instantly. Captain Maxwell Peters, who had been briefed about the situation, emerged from the cockpit. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and decades of flying experience, he approached with a respectful demeanor. "Miss Washington, I apologize for not greeting you earlier. We weren't informed you'd be traveling with us today." He turned to Alexandra with unmistakable authority. "Miss Holt, you need to move to your assigned seat immediately." Alexandra's face had drained of color, her earlier confidence evaporating. "I don't believe this. You can't be the CEO. That's ridiculous." Roger, the junior flight attendant who had first responded to the conflict, stepped forward. "It's true, Miss Holt. Miss Washington founded the airline 4 years ago. Her portrait hangs in our corporate headquarters." Another flight attendant nodded confirmation. "She personally designed our new service protocols last year." Alexandra stared at Jasmine with new eyes, seeing for the first time what she had refused to see before a powerful executive who happened to be a black woman. The cognitive dissonance played across her features as she struggled to reconcile her assumptions with reality. "You really own the airline?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Jasmine met her gaze directly. "Yes. I built this airline from nothing after being rejected by every major carrier in the country. Black Sky Airlines exists because I refuse to accept no for an answer from banks, from investors, and especially from people who think they can take what isn't theirs." The cabin remained silent, passengers and crew alike witnessing the dramatic reversal. Alexandra clutched her belongings, visibly processing the magnitude of her misjudgment. Officer Davis, now thoroughly uncomfortable with his initial assumptions, stepped back respectfully. "Miss Washington, we apologize for the confusion. Would you like us to escort Miss Holt from the aircraft?" The question hung in the air. Jasmine had the power now, power to have Alexandra removed, power to file a complaint that could end her career, power to make an example of someone who had dismissed her based solely on appearance. But as she looked at Alexandra's mortified expression, Jasmine remembered something her mother had told her long ago. True power isn't about punishing others. It's about having the option to punish and choosing a better path. The decision she made next would reveal more about her character and leadership than any corporate profile ever could. "She owns the airline, seriously," a voice whispered from the fifth row, breaking the tense silence that had fallen over the cabin. All eyes fixed on Jasmine as she stood in the aisle, straight-backed and composed despite the spectacle unfolding around her. Alexandra remained frozen in seat 3. Her complexion ashen as multiple flight attendants confirmed Jasmine's identity. "Miss Washington oversaw our entire fleet expansion last year," Brady explained to the now captivated passengers. "She personally pilots some of our aircraft." Alexandra's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. The reality of her situation was sinking in. She had attempted to dismiss and displace the very woman who signed her company's partnership checks. I had no idea," she finally managed, her voice barely audible. Jasmine maintained her professional demeanor. Clearly. Captain Peters stepped closer. "Miss Washington, how would you like us to proceed?" Alexandra began gathering her belongings with trembling hands, finally accepting the inevitable. "I'll move. Obviously, I'll move." As she stood, Alexandra knocked over her water bottle, sending it rolling under the seat. Her humiliation complete, she bent awkwardly to retrieve it, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Jasmine watched this unravel with mixed emotions. She had faced similar treatment throughout her journey to the top: dismissal, disbelief, and disrespect based solely on her appearance. Each incident had built calluses over her pride. "Before you go to your assigned seat," Jasmine said, "I'd like you to understand something. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. Alexandra froze, clearly expecting a public dressing down, or worse. Instead, Jasmine spoke clearly, but without malice. 4 years ago, I approached 7 major airlines with my resume. Despite my MBA, my pilot's license, and my background in aviation logistics, not one offered me a management position. One interviewer suggested I consider being a flight attendant instead. She gestured to the Black Sky logo embroidered on the seat. So I built this airline from nothing. I secured funding after 63 rejections. I developed routes to underserved communities that larger carriers had abandoned. I implemented profit sharing for every employee, from baggage handlers to pilots. Passengers listened rapt. Even those who had been irritated by the boarding delay were now fully engaged in the unfolding drama. Last year, Black Sky became the first regional airline to achieve both profitability and top-tier customer satisfaction ratings simultaneously, Jasmine continued. We did that not by cutting corners or mistreating people, but by recognizing the dignity and value of every person who steps onto our aircraft, whether they're in economy or first class. Alexandra swallowed hard, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. I didn't know who you were. That's precisely the point, Jasmine replied. None of us should need to be somebody important to be treated with basic respect. A spontaneous burst of applause erupted from several passengers. One elderly woman in row 2 nodded vigorously, eyes glistening with emotion. Alexandra gathered the last of her belongings, visibly shaken. I'll go to my assigned seat now. Actually, Jasmine said, surprising everyone, I'm offering you another option. The flight attendants exchanged confused glances. While I will be taking my rightful seat in 3A, I've arranged for you to be seated in 2C, Jasmine explained. It's still in first class, still has the legroom you claim to need, and it's actually closer to the lavatory if you have the medical issues you mentioned. Alexandra's confusion was evident. You're not having me removed from the flight. Would that solve anything? Jasmine asked. Would that change whatever led you to believe you could take someone else's seat and expect them to quietly accept it? Before Alexandra could answer, Captain Peters received a message through his headset. He turned to Jasmine. Miss Washington, the ground crew is asking about our departure status. We're now 20 minutes behind schedule. Jasmine nodded. Please tell them we're ready for immediate departure. Miss Holt will be seated in 2C, and I'll take my assigned seat in 3A. She turned to address the cabin crew. And I'd like to speak briefly with the team before takeoff if possible. Captain Peters nodded respectfully. Of course, Miss Washington. As Alexandra was escorted to her new seat, the other passengers watched with expressions ranging from satisfaction to awe. Jasmine finally settled into seat 3A, arranging her presentation materials on the tray table. Brady leaned down to speak privately. Miss Washington, on behalf of the crew, I sincerely apologize for this incident. No apology necessary, Jasmine replied, but I would like the contact information for whoever is managing your customer service training. I think we have an opportunity here. As the boarding process finally resumed, Jasmine gazed out the window at the Black Sky logo prominently displayed on the terminal. She had built this airline by turning rejection into determination, obstacles into opportunities. Today's confrontation was just one more reminder of why her work mattered not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated. The aircraft door closed with a definitive thunk. Despite the delay and the confrontation, Jasmine felt a renewed sense of purpose for the investor meeting ahead. She had just witnessed firsthand why Black Sky needed to remain independent under leadership that understood the human element of the business. Alexandra sat rigidly in 2C, her earlier confidence replaced by visible mortification. What she didn't yet realize was that this humbling moment would soon prove pivotal for both women in ways neither could anticipate. As Black Sky Airlines Flight 277 reached its cruising altitude of 33,000 feet, the cabin settled into the rhythmic hum of travel. Jasmine reviewed her presentation materials highlighting key points that would demonstrate why her company should remain independent despite Air Global's aggressive takeover attempt. The irony wasn't lost on her, fighting to maintain control of her airline while simultaneously defending her rightful seat on one of its planes. "More coffee?" Miss Washington Roger asked, approaching with a fresh carafe. "Thank you," she replied, noting the markedly improved service now that her identity was known. While she appreciated the attentiveness, it highlighted an uncomfortable truth. Respect came more readily with her title than with her humanity. In seat 2C, Alexandra remained unnaturally still, her body language broadcasting acute discomfort. She hadn't touched her complimentary mimosa or opened the breakfast service placed before her. Occasionally, she would glance back toward Jasmine before quickly averting her eyes when caught. The businessman who had recognized Jasmine earlier leaned across the aisle. "Miss Washington, I'm Jonathan Mercer with Altitude Investments. Your expansion strategy into mid-sized markets has been remarkable." "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. We identified a significant gap in service quality for those communities." "Smart play," he replied. "The major carriers abandoned those routes thinking they weren't profitable enough. You proved them wrong." "Those communities deserved better," Jasmine explained. "My team developed a sustainable model that serves their needs while maintaining healthy margins." Another passenger, a woman in her 50s, joined the conversation from across the aisle. "I fly this route twice monthly. I switched to Black Sky last year because your on-time performance was consistently better than competitors." "Reliability is our cornerstone," Jasmine acknowledged with a nod. "Our passengers need to trust that we'll get them where they need to be." The conversation expanded as other first-class passengers engaged, many sharing positive experiences with Black Sky. Some asked thoughtful questions about the airline industry, which Jasmine answered with authentic expertise. The dynamic stood in stark contrast to her boarding experience. Passengers who had previously ignored her now sought her insights and approval. During a moment of turbulence, Jasmine's thoughts drifted to her childhood. Her mother had worked as an airport custodian for 15 years, often bringing young Jasmine along during school breaks when childcare wasn't available. While her mother mopped terminals, Jasmine would watch aircraft take off and land, mesmerized by their power and grace. One day, a female pilot had noticed Jasmine's fascination and taken time to answer her questions. "There's no reason you couldn't fly one of these someday," the woman had told her. 25 years later, Jasmine not only flew planes, she owned the company that operated them. The turbulence subsided as Brady approached with a folded cocktail napkin. "Miss Washington, Miss Holt asked me to deliver this to you." Jasmine unfolded the napkin to find a hastily scrawled message. "I'm deeply sorry for my behavior. It was inexcusable." Alexandra Holt. Looking toward seat 2C, Jasmine caught Alexandra quickly turning away again. The apology seemed genuine, if inadequate. Jasmine had received countless apologies throughout her career from people who had underestimated her, questioned her qualifications, or simply failed to see her potential because of preconceptions. Some were sincere, many were merely performative. She slipped the napkin into her portfolio without response. Actions always spoke louder than words written on cocktail napkins. Midway through the flight, Jasmine's phone rang, one of the few on board with satellite connectivity for emergencies. It was Marcus Reynolds, her mentor and advisor. "The vultures are circling early," he warned without preamble. "Air Global's representation arrived with additional legal counsel. They're attempting to meet with board members individually before your presentation." Jasmine maintained her poker face despite the news. "That changes nothing. Our strategy is solid. They're pushing the narrative that Black Sky needs their resources to survive industry consolidation," Marcus continued, playing on fears about the economic climate. "Fear is only effective when there's no vision to counter it," Jasmine replied, aware that nearby passengers were eavesdropping with interest. After ending the call, she noticed several business travelers studying her with new respect. One woman in particular, a well-dressed executive type in row 4, leaned forward. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said quietly. "I'm Catherine Lin, CFO at Meridian Technologies. I've dealt with similar takeover attempts. If you're looking for technology partners to strengthen your position, I'd be happy to connect after we land." Another passenger, a gray-haired man in a perfectly tailored suit, passed his business card forward. Lawrence Johnson, Venture Capital. Your airline's growth metrics are impressive. We should talk. Throughout the remainder of the flight, Jasmine received 3 more business cards from executives who had previously taken no notice of her. The incident with Alexandra had inadvertently created networking opportunities that could prove valuable in her fight to maintain independence. News of the confrontation had spread throughout the cabin. Passengers from economy occasionally walked past on pretended trips to the lavatory, stealing glances at both women. Flight attendants reported that the story had reached the galley conversations with crew members, expressing admiration for Jasmine's handling of the situation. As the aircraft began its descent into Chicago, Brady approached Alexandra's seat. After a brief conversation, he made his way to Jasmine. "Miss Holt has asked if she might speak with you before we land," he informed her. "I told her it's entirely your decision." Jasmine considered the request. Her investor meeting left little room for distractions, yet something about Alexandra's demeanor suggested this conversation might be more than a simple extension of her napkin apology. "Please tell her she's welcome to approach after we land," Jasmine decided. "I'll have a few minutes before my car arrives." As the plane touched down at O'Hare International Airport, Jasmine gathered her materials, mentally transitioning to the critical meeting ahead. The incident with Alexandra already felt distant compared to the high-stakes boardroom battle awaiting her. What she couldn't have anticipated was how directly these two situations would soon intersect, or how the woman who had tried to take her seat would unexpectedly become instrumental in helping her keep her company. The aircraft taxied to the gate at O'Hare International Airport, where an unexpected sight greeted Jasmine. Through the window, a cluster of people with press badges and cameras waiting in the terminal. Someone had leaked information about the confrontation. Ms. Washington, Brady said quietly as passengers prepared to deplane, "There appears to be media at the gate. Would you prefer to exit through the service door?" Jasmine considered the option. Throughout her career, she had never shied away from difficult moments. "No, thank you. I'll exit normally." As first-class passengers were invited to disembark, Alexandra remained seated, allowing others to pass. Her earlier entitlement had been replaced by visible discomfort. Jasmine gathered her belongings efficiently, mentally preparing talking points for any reporters while focusing on her upcoming investor meeting. Stepping into the jetway, Jasmine heard the immediate click of cameras and flurry of questions as journalists spotted her. "Miss Washington, can you comment on the incident aboard your flight today? Is it true a passenger refused to recognize you as the CEO? Will Black Sky be implementing new policies regarding seat assignments?" Jasmine approached the microphones with practiced composure. What occurred today was unfortunately common for many travelers. Rather than focus on one incident, I'd prefer to address the broader industry challenge of ensuring respectful treatment for all passengers, regardless of appearance, background, or title. A reporter persisted. "But how did it feel to have someone refuse to believe you owned the airline?" "It felt like Tuesday," Jasmine replied, with a hint of wry humor that drew appreciative laughter. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an important meeting to attend." Black Sky Airlines appreciates your continued support and feedback as we work to provide exceptional service to all communities. With professional skill, she navigated through the media scrum toward the terminal exit. Her waiting car would take her directly to the downtown meeting where Black Sky's future would be decided. Every minute counted. As Jasmine approached the baggage claim area, she heard rapid footsteps behind her. Alexandra Holt was hurrying to catch up, her designer heels clicking against the terminal floor. "Miss Washington," she called. "Please, just 2 minutes of your time." Jasmine paused, checking her watch. She could spare 2 minutes barely. "Yes, Miss Holt." Alexandra took a deep breath. Her carefully maintained composure had crumbled, revealing something closer to authenticity. "My behavior on the plane was inexcusable. I'm truly sorry." "Apology accepted," Jasmine replied evenly, preparing to continue toward her waiting car. "There's more you should know," Alexandra blurted, stopping Jasmine in her tracks. "I'm not just a gate agent. I work for Air Global's corporate strategy team. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Air Global, the very company attempting to acquire Black Sky in a hostile takeover. Suddenly, Alexandra's presence on the flight, her attempt to take Jasmine's seat, took on entirely new dimensions. "You were sent to spy on me," Jasmine stated, the pieces falling into place. "To gather intelligence before my investor meeting." Alexandra's face flushed. "I was asked to observe and report back on your presentation materials and strategy. The seat confusion was unplanned. When I realized who you were, I panicked." And now Jasmine asked her voice level despite the shocking revelation. "Now I'm questioning everything about my career and the company I work for," Alexandra admitted. "The way Air Global's executives talked about your airline and about you personally, it was deeply problematic." Jasmine studied the woman, carefully assessing her sincerity. "What exactly did they say?" Alexandra glanced around the bustling baggage claim area. "Not here. But I'll tell you this, their takeover plan isn't what they're presenting publicly. They intend to dismantle Black Sky, eliminate your equity stake through legal maneuvering, and absorb only your most profitable routes while abandoning the communities that depend on your service." The information aligned with Jasmine's suspicions, but hearing it confirmed by an insider sent a chill through her. Thousands of jobs and dozens of underserved communities hung in the balance. "Why are you telling me this?" Jasmine asked. "You're betraying your employer." "Because what happened on that plane forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths," Alexandra replied, her voice dropping, "about the company I work for, about the assumptions I make, about who I've become in corporate America." She continued with growing conviction. "Air Global's leadership laughed when they assigned me to observe you. They said a white woman in designer clothes would automatically be given more credibility than," their words, not mine, "some diversity hire, playing airline executive. They expected me to easily manipulate my way into information about your strategy." Jasmine's expression remained neutral despite her internal reaction to these revelations. Instead, Alexandra continued, "You demonstrated more leadership and grace in 20 minutes than I've witnessed in 5 years at Air Global. You had every right to have me removed from that flight. You didn't. That matters to me." An announcement echoed through the terminal as travelers streamed past, oblivious to the consequential conversation unfolding beside them. "I have specifics," Alexandra said. "Their financing strategy, their regulatory end-run plan, the board members they've already compromised. I'll tell you everything, not because I expect forgiveness for my behavior, but because what they're planning is wrong. Your airline actually serves people. Air Global has deliberately abandoned." Jasmine checked her watch again. Her investor meeting started in 45 minutes. "Why should I trust you? This could be an elaborate setup." Alexandra reached into her bag and produced a flash drive. "This contains internal communications about the acquisition strategy, emails you were never meant to see, projections showing which Black Sky routes they plan to eliminate immediately after acquisition, evidence of how they've approached your board members with individual incentives." She held out the drive. "I'm risking my career by giving you this. But after what happened today, I can't be part of their strategy anymore." Jasmine considered the flash drive, weighing risk against potential benefit. Corporate espionage was a serious matter, but so was fighting to protect her company. "I have a car waiting," Jasmine said finally. "If you're serious about this, you can join me for the ride downtown. We'll review these materials together. I'll decide what to do with the information and with you afterward." Alexandra nodded, relief visible on her face. "Thank you." As they walked toward the exit, an unexpected alliance forming between them, Jasmine reflected on the strange turns life could take. The woman who had dismissed her, who had attempted to take her seat without a second thought, might now become instrumental in saving her company. The universe had a peculiar way of delivering justice and opportunity simultaneously. The gleaming glass headquarters of Midwest Financial Partners towered over Chicago's downtown as Jasmine's car pulled to the curb. During the 30-minute ride from O'Hare, she and Alexandra had reviewed the damning evidence on the flash drive internal Air Global memos outlining their true intentions for Black Sky Airlines. They never plan to honor your leadership role, Alexandra had explained, pointing to a particularly telling email from Air Global's CEO. This transition plan shows your position eliminated within 90 days of acquisition, despite their public statements about keeping your executive team intact. Now, standing before the building where Black Sky's fate would be decided, Jasmine made a bold decision. "You're coming with me." Alexandra's eyes widened. "Into the board meeting? That would end my career at Air Global instantly." "Based on what you've shown me," Jasmine replied, "I think that ship has already sailed. The question is whether you're truly committed to doing what's right." After a moment's hesitation, Alexandra nodded resolutely. "I am." The executive conference room on the 42nd floor hummed with tension as Jasmine entered precisely on time. Around the polished mahogany table sat Black Sky's board of directors, a mix of early investors, industry veterans, and corporate governance experts. At the far end, a contingent from Air Global waited with predatory patience, their legal team arranged strategically beside them. Conversation halted abruptly as heads turned toward Jasmine and then shifted to Alexandra standing just behind her. Miss Washington. Leonard Peterson, Black Sky's chairman, began with evident confusion. "We weren't expecting additional participants." Air Global's CEO Richard Harrington leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "Alexandra, what are you doing here?" Without acknowledging him, Jasmine addressed the room confidently. "Good afternoon. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Alexandra Holt, who until approximately 1 hour ago was part of Air Global's corporate strategy team. She has graciously agreed to provide some context about Air Global's true acquisition plans quite different from what's been presented to this board." Harrington's face flushed crimson. "This is completely inappropriate. Miss Holt is bound by confidentiality agreements. Any disclosure would constitute—" "Corporate malfeasance is not protected by confidentiality agreements," Mr. Harrington. Jasmine interrupted smoothly, signaling to her assistant to distribute folders to each board member. "These documents outline Air Global's actual post-acquisition strategy, including the elimination of service to 27 communities currently served by Black Sky, the termination of 62% of our workforce, and the systematic dismantling of our equity structure." The board members began reviewing the documents with growing concern. Murmurs spread around the table as particularly damning sections were discovered. "Is this accurate?" Peterson asked Alexandra directly. Alexandra stepped forward. "Yes, sir. I was personally involved in developing these projections. Air Global has presented a very different narrative publicly than what they've planned internally." Harrington slammed his hand on the table. "This meeting is over. We withdraw our offer immediately." "Actually," Jasmine replied calmly, "I believe we're just getting started." She moved to the presentation screen and launched into the strategy she had prepared. A comprehensive vision for Black Sky's future that now incorporated preemptive responses to Air Global's tactics. With each slide, she built a compelling case for independence, growth, and community service that stood in stark contrast to the cynical dismantling Air Global had planned. Rather than surrendering to acquisition, Jasmine explained, displaying route maps and financial projections. "I propose a strategic partnership network that maintains our independence while creating mutually beneficial alliances." To everyone's surprise, Alexandra stepped forward. "If I may, Miss Washington." Jasmine nodded, curious about what would follow. Air Global's analysis actually confirms Miss Washington's business model is superior for regional markets, Alexandra stated, pulling up specific data points from the files she had brought. Their own projections show that Black Sky's community-focused approach generates higher customer loyalty and lower operating costs than Air Global's hub-centric model. They don't want to learn from it, they want to eliminate it as competition. For the next 30 minutes, Jasmine and Alexandra tag-teamed the presentation, revealing both Black Sky's strengths and Air Global's vulnerabilities with devastating precision. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to interest to open support as the full picture emerged. Jasmine concluded with a powerful visual timeline of her journey from watching planes as the daughter of an airport custodian to building Black Sky Airlines against overwhelming odds. Each milestone represented a barrier, Overcome a skeptic converted a community served when larger carriers had abandoned it. Throughout my career, I've been underestimated, Jasmine stated, her voice strong and clear. People have taken one look at me and decided I didn't belong in first class in the cockpit or in the boardroom. Each time I've proven them wrong, not by demanding recognition, but by delivering results. She displayed Black Sky's current performance metrics passenger satisfaction scores, leading the industry on-time performance, exceeding competitors' profit margins, growing steadily quarter over quarter. Air Global doesn't want to acquire us because we're failing, she concluded. They want to acquire us because we're succeeding with a model that exposes the flaws in theirs. They want to silence innovation rather than adapt to it. The boardroom fell silent as her presentation ended. Peterson cleared his throat. I believe we're ready to vote on the acquisition offer, unless there are further questions. Harrington and his team sat stone-faced, their takeover strategy in shambles. The vote was unanimous. Black Sky Airlines would remain independent with full board support for Jasmine's strategic partnership vision instead. As the meeting adjourned, journalists waited outside. News of the dramatic confrontation had spread far beyond the airport incident. Jasmine and Alexandra faced the cameras together, an unlikely alliance born from confrontation and transformed into collaboration. Black Sky Airlines is proud to announce not only our continued independence, but also a new diversity in aviation initiative, Jasmine stated to the assembled press. Miss Holt will be heading this program, bringing her considerable industry experience to bear on creating opportunities for underrepresented groups in commercial aviation. Alexandra stepped to the microphone. Today has been transformative for me personally and professionally. I witnessed firsthand how unconscious bias affects our industry and our society. I'm committed to addressing these issues transparently and systemically in my new role. Later that evening, as they boarded Jasmine's company jet for the return flight to Atlanta, Alexandra asked the question that had been lingering between them. Why did you offer me a position after how I treated you? Jasmine considered her answer carefully. Because transformation requires opportunity. You recognized your mistake and took action to correct it at significant personal risk. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need. She gazed out the window as they lifted off from Chicago, the city lights glittering below like stars. Besides, I built this airline precisely because I know what it feels like to be dismissed, underestimated, and unwelcome. Breaking that cycle requires more than just succeeding personally. It means creating spaces where others can succeed too, even those who once stood in your way. As the aircraft climbed into the night sky, Jasmine reflected on the day's journey. From defending her seat on a plane to defending her company in the boardroom, the underlying principle remained the same, standing firmly in the space she had earned, while expanding that space for others to join her. The next morning, Black Sky Airlines announced its new company policy. All executives would periodically travel as regular passengers on commercial flights, experiencing the airline from the customer perspective. And first-class seat 3A would henceforth be designated on all aircraft as the founder's seat, a small but meaningful reminder that appearances can be deceiving, assumptions can be wrong, and sometimes the person you dismiss today might be the very one who owns your seat tomorrow. This story illustrates powerful truths about racial discrimination and personal empowerment in today's world. Jasmine Washington demonstrates that true leadership isn't about punishing those who wrong us, but making principled decisions that transform situations and people for the better. When faced with discrimination, she didn't allow herself to be diminished or displaced. She stood firmly in her truth while maintaining her dignity and professionalism. The confrontation reveals how prejudice often operates through assumptions rather than facts. Alexandra didn't see Jasmine as an airline owner because she had predetermined who belongs in positions of power. This unconscious bias affects millions daily in workplaces, public spaces, and transportation. Perhaps most importantly, the story shows that overcoming discrimination requires both individual courage and systemic change. Jasmine transformed her personal experience into institutional improvement through the Diversity in Aviation Initiative and the policy requiring executives to experience their own airline as customers. The ultimate victory wasn't just Jasmine keeping her seat or saving her company. It was creating space for others to grow, even those who initially stood against her. By offering Alexandra redemption through accountability, she demonstrated that breaking cycles of discrimination requires both standing your ground and extending opportunity for transformation. Would you have shown the same grace as Jasmine if someone had questioned your right to be somewhere? Have you ever had to defend your presence in a space where others assumed you didn't belong? Share your story in the comments below. This account of overcoming discrimination inspired you? Please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that celebrates resilience and challenges prejudice. Don't forget to share this video with someone facing similar battles who needs to be reminded of their worth and power. Thank you for joining us on this journey through courage and transformation. Remember, your seat is yours, your space is earned, and your voice matters.